Tokenism, the practice of making only a perfunctory or symbolic effort to be inclusive, especially by including or recruiting a small number of people from underrepresented groups only to give the appearance of sexual, racial, and other forms of equality and fair treatment within a workforce or other space without any meaningful commitment to real inclusion and change. All right, this happens a lot. I'm gonna tell you a quick story about this here because this is real. Okay, when we're talking about tokenism, I kid you not, this is a true story. I was walking on a college campus once. I was an adult. I wasn't a student. I was a college, just someone that was working in a profession in which I was helping students get tours, helping our underserved students get access to college, and by giving them college tours, helping them out with financial aid and those kind of things, scholarships and all that. All right. So I'm on campus walking, minding my own business. And there was a photographer that came, was like, hey, come over here real quick. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'm seeing what's going on. And as I walk over there, there's a group of maybe 4 other students. And one of the things that I noticed, again, being a person of color who's typically, again, I live in Idaho, so I'm typically in spaces that are predominantly white. And so I noticed, wow, this 5 other people, they're pretty diverse. You had different race, you had different, had gender, you had all these different things. And he's like, hey, I need you to take a picture with us. So I asked, well, why do you want me to take a picture? I'm happy to help or whatever, but what's the picture for? He says, this is going to be for our new marketing. Now, again, I live in Idaho. I think you could imagine someone that lives in Idaho, if you're not familiar with the demographics, you could guess there is not a lot of racial diversity within this state. However, I wasn't even a student on campus. I was just literally a random dude on campus, right? Walking their campus. But the idea was, let's take this picture with all these diverse individuals to show how diverse our campus is. But the reality of it is, let's keep it real. If I'm a potential candidate, like I'm applying for colleges and I see this publication, I see the pamphlet and I see this picture. Oh, I'm thinking, maybe this school is they're very welcoming. I'm going to feel accepted, included, and supported. I apply for this college, show up for first day of school, and I don't see that stuff. I don't see that representation. It's a bait and switch, if you will. Now I think about it, it's a bait and switch. The point is that would be just one example of tokenism. So you might be wondering, well, Sheldon, did you take the picture? No, I didn't take the picture. And the reason why I didn't take the picture, honestly, the reason why I didn't take the picture was, one, I told him, I was looking, hey man, I'm not even a student. So he's like, oh, are you a staff member? He thought I was a coach, right? Because that's always the next thing. Is I usually get someone thinks I'm some sort of basketball, football coach or something like that. So he said, oh, if you're not a student here, then you must be an athlete or you must be a coach. And I said, no, I'm here actually touring your campus. I'm not a student. I'm not a staff member. I'm not a stakeholder in that sense. At that moment, I didn't really think about it until later. When we're thinking about tokenism, I didn't think about it until later. I was like, this person literally grabbed me out the blue to provide that representation. Now, I would take the picture, go on about my business, and then some poor, unsuspecting student, maybe a student of color, sees a picture of me in that pamphlet and believes that this is the representation or a representation of what the school has to offer, and they're going to be disappointed when they show up and it's not there. Okay, so that's just one example of tokenism. But here's the thing: tokenization objectifies the individual and effectively strips them of their individuality, reduces them to a prop based on their skin color, gender, etc. It robs them of their voice. All of these factors become valuable assets in the business of advertising and raising the profiles of schools and companies. It benefits the organization. However, it doesn't benefit the individual. And like I said, I believe this is a classic example of what a bait and switch can look like. We're going to talk about the mental health effects that this has on individuals, how this looks. And so let's break it down some more. All right. So that was just a little bit of what it could look like. But let's dig into this a little bit more. Okay. So some further examples of what tokenism in schools could look like. Editing curriculum by simply changing names to ethnic sounding names. You get your word problems. I'm a math teacher. I want to be culturally responsive. And so I'm going to do this. And so what I'm going to do is, rather than saying Mary and Michael, I'm going to say Jamal. I'm going to say Jamal and Lucretia. Okay, so Lucretia has 5 apples and Jamal has 10 apples. If we put them all in the basket, how many apples do they have together? Okay, changing the curriculum just to show, oh, again, we're going to provide these ethnic sounding names, Jose and Juan and all these, Miguel and all these names. We'll just throw those into our word problems. Now we're culturally responsive. Now we're providing, a diverse word pool, those kind of things, that mindset. Okay. Now, it's not just limited to just how we might edit just some names. It also extends into our racial slurs. So you think about those quote unquote classics, your Huckleberry Finns, To Kill a Mockingbirds. I legit had an educator one time ask me, oh, can I change the N-word to African American? I said, absolutely not. Do not do that. Right. But that would be another way, right? Oh, okay. I want to bring this text into the classroom, or this, again, considered a classic. So I need to provide this information to my students, but do recognize that the terms or the words that are referred to certain people, specifically certain individuals of color, we don't say Negro leagues anymore. We don't say Negro. So rather than saying the Negro League, I'm going to change it to the African American League. No, okay, that would be another example. All right, let's go even further, okay, because I'm glad y'all asked. Well, what other examples are there? What else could it look like in schools? All right, I'll give you some more. This is a classic one. We talk about this one all the time. Those quote unquote tokenized holidays, special events. We literally pack up all of our indigenous curriculum, put it into November, Native American Heritage Month. Or we save everything, all our African American stuff, all our Black stuff, save for February. Or, Pride Month. We do this for Asian Pacific Islander Month. Like, we do these things. We save all of our, because I don't have enough, right? I don't have enough. And so I save everything for those 30 days, 28 days. Save it all for those times. And then that's it. What happens on day 31? What happens on the next month, right when March starts? St. Patrick's Day. Boom. Ready to go. Okay. Tokenized opportunities. All right. Now, here's the thing, because I'm going to throw the caveat out here, because I'm saying this now, but I do think it's important to address or to do this awareness. However, this should not be the only day or the only time period that we're discussing these things. Okay. Which will lead me to my next point. Sometimes we wait to those cultural months or those special holidays. We show only information and content and only discuss things from a what? Oppressive standpoint. So even though we have our quote unquote multicultural day, or we're teaching a multicultural lesson, but we're showing all that information, the cultural side of things, from a condescending, primitive, maybe even exotic standpoint. We talk about the historical figures. However, again, those historical figures are the acceptable ones. These are the ones that we're okay with teaching y'all about. I might get a little controversial, but I'm just saying, Rosa Parks is often a very common one that we hear a lot in our schools. We talk about Dr. King. Those are a lot of things that you can expect every year to hear about. Maybe even George Washington Carver. I was teaching a class. I've been teaching a class this summer, and someone asked me, and one of my students asked me about Malcolm X. We were talking about different things, and I said, and they had they've heard of the name, but they didn't know who Malcolm X was. And I had to have a conversation with him. I said, see, that's a challenge. Unfortunately, Malcolm X probably wasn't, talked about a lot in your school. Maybe it was a little paragraph, but you got a lot of information about Dr. King. And I believe it's very important that if we're going to teach about various cultures, various communities, we can't always limit it to just the ones that are quote unquote acceptable. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, Dr. King, unfortunately, was assassinated. And when we think about the work that Dr. King did and the work that Malcolm X did, and also and those are, I would argue, those are two civil rights leaders that we talk about maybe, but there's so many others. But if we're only teaching about historical figures that had to do with, abolitionism, civil rights, or other race-related issues, that's the only time we discuss individuals of color or various identities that are outside of the dominant culture's perspective, and it's always about some sort of civil rights or race related, that would be tokenism. Well, let's talk about what our books could look like. Oh, we just added all these diverse books into our library, but there's no plan. You literally Googled, or you went to diversebooks.com or something like that. You ordered a bunch, and as you ordered a bunch of books, there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just a checkbox. Oh yeah, now we have we're excited because we have an extra 100 books written by individuals of color. But there's no, maybe all those books are only about race. That's the only conversations happening in those books. You know, they're literally diverse books books written by people of color about diversity, and that's it. The other thing sometimes that we see when it comes to tokenism from my folks with individuals with disabilities, for example, you know, all the conversations, all the curriculum content that we present in regards to our individuals would only come from some sort of conquering adversity standpoint. Now there's just, you know, they're existing, they're living and they're surviving. They have you know, whatever, you know, this individual has no legs and they were able to climb a mountain. Like everything's on some sort of triumph, and there's nothing beyond that. You might be saying, well, you know, those are great things to you know, we need to talk about things. And I agree wholeheartedly. We do need to discuss all of these things. However, that is often the only thing that's discussed, and we don't go beyond that. The other one is, and this happens a lot, this happens to me a lot here in Idaho, expecting individuals to represent their identities. You're in the classroom, there's one or two students, a handful of kids that represent a certain identity. Teacher calls them out. Hey, what do you think? What do your folks think about what's going on in our country right now? Or what are your thoughts on this or that that's related to your identity? As if they speak for the entire community. Those are challenges. This happened to me lots of times.